Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be talking about the new cabinet reshuffle, new ministers. 9 ministers actually have assumed their posts as the head of different ministries. Also, 4 deputy ministers were appointed. And joining us here in the studio to shed more light on the new cabinet reshuffle and the achievements of the previous cabinet, we're joined by Engineer Samir Riyad, member of the Egyptian Federation of Industries. We're also joined by Dr. Sharif Al-Helwa, the political and economic expert. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, let's check out this report regarding the new cabinet reshuffle, and we'll be right back to start our discussion.
The Parliament ratified on Tuesday the final list of the new cabinet after receiving it from Prime Minister Sharif Ismail. The mini reshuffle included 9 portfolios and 4 deputies for the Ministers of Agriculture and Planning. The new ministers are Dr. Abdelmenem Abdelwadoud Mohammed El-Banna as Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, Councillor Omar Al-Khattab Marwan Abdullah Arafa as Minister of Parliament's Council Affairs, Dr. Sahar Abdelmenem Nasr as Minister of Investment and International Cooperation, Dr. Ali Said Ali Al-Musalhi as Minister of Supply and Trade, Dr. Muhammad Hisham Zain Al-Abidin Al-Sharif as Minister of Local Development, Dr. Hala Hilmi Al-Said Yunus as Minister of Planning and Administrative Reform, Dr. Khalid Atif Abdel Ghaffar as Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research, Dr. Tariq Jalal Shawqi Ahmed Shawqi as Minister of Education and Vocational Education. Meanwhile, the new deputies for the Ministers of Agriculture and Planning are Dr. Muhammad Abdel Tawab Hassan Al-Sayed as Deputy of the Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, Dr. Mona Mehriz Ali Hassanin as Deputy of the Agriculture Minister for Animal Fishery and Poultry Resources Affairs, Dr. Safwat Abdel Hamid Al-Haddad Ahmed Hamed as Deputy of the Agriculture Minister for Services and Planning Affairs, Dr. Salah Abdurrahman Ahmed Abdurrahman as Deputy of the Agriculture Minister for Administrative Reform. Citizens hope that the coming change will be a radical one leading to a more efficient and high-caliber government capable of delivering on services and policies.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and starting off our discussion right away. Dr. Al-Helwa, first of all, before we start talking about the new ministers and the new cabinet reshuffle, let's try and assess the performance of the previous cabinet, the previous ministers who were replaced. How would you evaluate the cabinet's performance before it got reshuffled?
Well, overall, there has been quick economic developments in the last year that required economic background in order to keep up with the quick pace. So far the performance has been good enough, but not perfect. So the reshuffle is, what it seems, is required for keeping up the pace with the new developments. So it's good in a way because we're going to face immediate economic developments in the next few months, probably by June, and it requires someone that has the capacity to handle such quick decisions and keep up with the international pressure to develop Egypt economically.
Well, Engineer Riyad, it seems that whenever there's a cabinet reshuffle, mainly it takes place within ministries of finance, investment, the economic group within the cabinet. Why is that so, and do you feel that a constant reshuffling within this part of the cabinet is good for the performance of the government as a whole, or would you like to see some elements of longevity within this department?
You know, to start with, economy is one of the major things in any reshuffling or anything in the world, because the standard of living, it is, you know, it is crucial for any government to raise the standard of living in the country, you know, to industrialize the country, to do everything possible to enable the people to raise their standard of living. This is one issue. The second issue, I would evaluate the performance of any responsible minister or responsible figure according to the strategy which is put and the execution which his ministry is done to enable us to evaluate his performance. But this way, I would like to say this: we are not aware of the strategy of the whole thing. You know, that's why it's very difficult to evaluate how good are they or how bad are they. That's why you know, we have to measure, and we don't have the tools to measure it, you know. And this is, I believe, one of the weaknesses, which one person will say this is fantastic, the other one says not good, you know. This is about time that we will measure things according to certain scientific way, you know, not emotional.
Well, Dr. Helwa, if we look at the performance of the economic group within the cabinet previously, now, over the past few months, we've seen a higher rate of inflation. We've seen the value of the Egyptian pound drop against the dollar, excluding, obviously, the past few days where the value of the Egyptian pound started to go up against the dollar. Would you say that these were things that were inevitable to happen, and it's not really any sort of weakness or weak performance by this group within the cabinet, or do you think that, no, the cabinet is responsible for, or at least a bit responsible regarding the inflation, the value of the Egyptian pound? Would you say that these things were inevitable to happen?
Well, it's inevitable because of the balance of trade, and it's obvious we are not exporting as much as we should. At the same time, the current cabinet were not quick enough in accepting international investments, which will allow inflow of foreign currency into the economy. So therefore, maybe the reshuffle has something to do with it, because they want a quicker pace, quicker decisions, more volume of international investors. So it's inevitable. It was deemed to happen that the Egyptian currency was going to be devalued, because the pace we were going with in the last 5-6 years were not equivalent to the population growth that we're going through.
Yes. So. Engineer Riyad, one of the part of the new reshuffle is actually the merging of two ministries now headed by Dr. Sahar Nasr, Minister of Investment and International Cooperation. Do you feel this is the right move for the merging of those two ministries? We've seen a lot of activities done by Dr. Sahar Nasr. A lot of agreements have been signed, a lot of funds. Do you feel that this is the right step in this direction?
If I can remember, we always complain about, you know, the responsibilities of different ministry and the cooperation between a ministry and ministry. And that's why if we take any country in the world, we will not find this number of ministries. And I am in favor of merging a lot of ministries together to enable us to have an easier, you know, solution for a lot of our problems.
Dr. Helwa, now, also, it seems to be there's a lot of importance regarding the Ministry of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, and also animals, fishery and poultry production. It seems that there is a lot of importance regarding this sector. Do you feel that this is somehow an integral part in actually providing the basic commodities of food to the Egyptian citizens?
Yes, of course, it's part of the food security program. There is a lot of international support for developing our agriculture systems, to employ more Egyptians in the agriculture system. So it's an integral part of developing the economy and for food security.
Well, do you feel that with the animal, fishery and poultry resources and the agricultural and land reclamation. Do you feel that this will still be, this section, this ministry will still be facing a lot of difficulties with the high inflation rate, with the value of the Egyptian pound against the dollar? Do you feel that it still needs a whole lot more than just a cabinet reshuffle to boost this segment?
Well, it needs all the local sectors to cooperate with them, to support them. A lot of the agriculture products that we have in Egypt are imported. So we have to support the local economy and the local agriculture system, and the local farmers and the local, any entity that will support the agriculture ministry. So it's going to be difficult for them until everybody is cooperating together to support their development.
Yes. Engineer Riyad, also there are two new ministers for higher education and scientific research, and also vocational education. Now, we've been talking for quite a while about really the importance of boosting the health sector and also the educational sector within the Egyptian society. Do you feel that appointing two ministers within the educational section, do you think that we are prepping ourselves to have a major boost or a major revamp regarding this sector?
Well, we have to wait and see. You know, if the result is positive, then it's the right move. If not, you know, that's it. You know, I believe always in education is very, very important. If we're adding another minister on top of that, you know, to enable us to have a big role and to make an improvement in the education system and the education, you know, in general, I will welcome anything, you know, 2, 3, 4, you know, whatever.
Yes.
If this will boost, you know, and they will improve the level of, you know, and the standard of the education, I will appreciate it very much. You know.
Well, do you think that even if we do have a reshuffle within these ministries, do you feel that it's not just about the ministers per se, it's also about the funding necessary for strengthening these sectors?
I believe in the, you know, in one thing, that it's the nation all together, the output of the individual, and, you know, it is very, very important. And I believe, you know, the guidance to a lot of people through education and through improvement of their standard of everything. This is an aim for us, you know, to improve our economy and to improve our standard of living and to improve our way of life.
Dr. Helwa, now we've seen this new cabinet reshuffle. Do you feel that it is... What is the nature of having a new minister at a ministry? Do you follow the sort of the strategy that was followed, or the system that was followed by the previous minister, or do you try to reinvent or develop a new mechanism of how the system should work within the ministry?
Well, the minister's job is to follow policy and develop policy, and then make sure that this policy is implemented throughout his ministry. Each minister has different agenda, and each minister has different background that they come from. So I believe for the new ministers, it will be difficult to follow the same strategies that were followed by the previous ministers, because there was no if they were correct, there was no reason to change them. So I believe they will come with a new idea, new policies, and probably a quicker decision-making process to allow the grand scheme of economic developments in Egypt.
Yes. Well, these new ministers, within each and every single ministry, they do have their own policies and new strategy. But what about the implementation of such policies and strategies? What about the people under the minister? What about the middle level of management within the ministry? Do you feel that they are doing the best they can to implement and follow any strategy suggested by the ministry that would and so follow the direction of the government?
Well, this is a very tricky question because we, in Egypt, we have a problem with bureaucracy, which is basically targeting the second tier in the ministry, which is the deputies and the assistants for the minister. So you have to re-educate them about how to function quicker, in a more efficient way, and at the same time without losing focus of what's the grand scheme of, or what's the policy for each ministry.
Yes. Well, Dr. Riyad, apart from the new 9 ministers, 4 deputy ministers were appointed. Now, usually people didn't really take notice of the deputy minister or their appointments, but it seems that it is quite an important part now, focused on by every member of society. How important is it, this position of deputy ministers, and how effective will they be within the hierarchy of the ministry?
Like any other profession, minister is a professional work. And if we don't, prepare this post and educate people how to run a ministry and to apply the right system and the strategy is going to be executed by professional ways, I don't think this is a very, very important move. I would love to see 1 and 2 and 3, vice ministers, because this, we want to educate people, for the post. I believe this is very important. It is. I do recommend it very much. But by the way, I think time is not in our favor at all. And that's why we have to speed up everything. And we have to be professional. And we have to imitate other nations and other people in every way.
Yes. Well, do you feel that these deputy ministers, it is some sort of also an educational stage for these people, prepping them to maybe one day head the ministries they're working in?
Definitely. This is the job for the future. Then you have got a wide range of choosing from the professional people. This is a professional job. It is not getting a professor at the university or this and that or Nobel Prize, person. No, it is a professional work. I'm sorry, we are, sometimes, we are very emotional on that, and this has nothing to do with emotions. This is a practical way of choosing the right person for the job.
Yes. Well, Dr. Helwa, now looking at the coming goals, with this reshuffle, do you feel that there are new goals maybe for the government different to the ones of the previous one? With the development, the economic and political developments, do the goals change a little bit? Are they altered, or are they just the same? They just need a different kind of implementation and pace?
I'm not sure if the policy has changed. We had the same prime minister for the last 2 years, and there was a reshuffle just last year in March, where 10 ministers were changed. So it seems they have the same policy, but maybe the ministers they're choosing are not following the policy. So they needed someone to execute the policies in a faster pace, maybe more professional, maybe with more economic background or development background, which will be translated to the overall development policy.
Well, if a reshuffle happens, let's say maybe once every year, sometimes twice a year, what are the bases of actually choosing a minister and appointing them? Is it work experience? Is it a different attitude in work? What are the bases of actually choosing the minister instead of choosing one and then changing them a little bit later? What are the bases? What is the criteria?
I think it depends on both factors you mentioned. It's the background or the work experience and the way they run their business or run their daily affairs. A minister is a different animal. He's not a technician. He's not a technical advisor. He's more of a politician that follows policies, understands how all the ministries are connected and how the economy is connected together. So he's not an engineer trying to figure out a small problem. It's like more of a manager running an entire economy.
Yes.
So I believe they have to put more effort in choosing a different type of animal to link everything together and understand how the Ministry of Irrigation, for example, have a problem will affect the entire investment ministry.
Yes,
So.
definitely. Well, Engineer Riyadh, the Prime Minister has mentioned that they choose the ministers depending on who they see would actually push the country more towards their economic reform program. How far are we within this economic reform program? Are we halfway there? Are we still in the early stages? Are we moving in the right direction? Are there too many obstacles that the government is facing?
Definitely, there is a lot of obstacles, you know, and we are overestimating the job of the, the job of the minister. The minister is a job which is very, very important in our society, you know, because he is, he is doing the planning, he is doing the strategy, he is doing the execution, he is doing, practically everything, which is, I do think this should be minimize the role of a minister in a way or another. As my colleague here says, that the minister is a political issue more than a practical, going into the strategy and so on. Should be the vice minister, the people which they are having long enough in the ministry to execute the policy of the ministry. But in our case here, the minister is doing a lot, which is sometimes he fails. And we are just, blaming him for his failure. And sometimes he cannot do it all,
Yes. Well, Dr. Halwa, we're talking about these reshuffles and we're talking about the economic activity within the government. What about the political side of it? How do you see the political performance of the previous government, and how do you feel that this reshuffle would maybe change or redirect or push forward the political direction the country is taking? Because we're talking about tourism, we're talking also about the fight against terrorism, we're talking about foreign affairs and foreign relations. How is the performance of our cabinet in the political segment within the cabinet?
Well, so far they have been doing okay. I mean, Dr. Sahar Nasr was able to sign a few agreements and travel all over the world, meeting with officials and politicians and bringing more donor money into Egypt. So far they have been doing okay following the political agenda. Again, it's too quick to decide have they been doing their best because it's only been 1 year. If they've been here longer, we might have been able to make an assessment about it.
Yes. Well, what about, for instance, the tourism sector? The tourism sector, we've been saying that, well, it has been knocked really hard after the political developments that took place over the past few years. And now recently we're hearing about governments lifting their travel bans, really encouraging their countries, their citizens to come to Egypt for tourism. And also the fight against terrorism. This is a topic that is on top of every agenda of every summit, of every traveling duties by the presidency or the government. How far do you think our government has been performing within these files?
Well, reality terrorism is all over the world. It's not just in Egypt. We had terrorism in France last year, and the terrorism activities did not affect the inflow of tourists into France. They still have over 80 million tourists per year. The problem with Egypt with tourism is not just the political atmosphere. It has to do with competition. You have other countries in the region that are offering better service, better prices, more accepting atmosphere for foreigners to be in Egypt. So far, this sector needs more reforms. The tourism sector all over Egypt, I believe, needs reforms, and they're not doing their best. And hopefully things will be better in the near future, because this is a very integral arm in the economic developments in Egypt. We're talking about 10 to 11 billion dollars a year, which is a hefty loss for Egypt.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, Engineer Riyadh, which of the ministries would you say have been really overachieving within their work and their duties? Would you say the energy sector has really been working very well, very hard? Do you think tourism sector has been working hard? Do you think education? Do you think health? What ministry did you feel that was really overachieving, and which did you feel was underachieving?
It's very difficult to assess, you know, to judge things like this, because as I said before, if there is a strategy well known and it was transparent to everybody, then we could measure it in a certain ways, you know, percentage wise and so on. But unfortunately, we don't know the strategy of every ministry and what is their target and what they achieved and the time of the achievement. All of this, it makes it very difficult to do it so. But definitely, all of them, they have got good intention, you know, and they want it very much. But sometimes, some people need more time, you know, to achieve what they can do, you know, because the cooperation of everybody in the ministry and cooperation of the whole of the country is needed. And I believe the output of every individual today, I believe, should be the target, not depending on one man, even if it is a minister or not a minister. I believe in that we have, all of us, to face the difficulties which we are having, you know, and we have to act, because we talk about tourism, for example. I believe, you know, tourism is very important, but we shouldn't depend on it entirely, because it is ups and downs, you know. And as we see that this tourism was booming or was good, and then it went down, and then it affected our economy. But if we have got a very strong economy through our people and through the industry and agriculture and all of these things, it wouldn't have been affecting us like this.
Yes.
And this should be seen, that is, our economy should depend on the 90 million people, not depending on tourists or the transferring of the funds of outside of Egypt or the Suez Canal. All of this should be over and above to increase the economy, or the output of every individual. It should be increased to enable us to have a better standard of living.
Definitely. Well, Dr. Helwa, after we saw this reshuffle, were you surprised by any reshuffling that took place within a certain ministry? Were you expecting new ministers at different ministries that didn't really take place?
Do I have to answer?
No, please.
To be honest, overall, I expected a reshuffle. Not a specific ministry, but as he mentioned, it's an integral part. Every individual in Egypt needs to work harder. A failing minister is not really the issue. It's the entire ministry, from the youngest employee to the minister, need to focus on developing themselves, having higher output than what they're used to. If they produce 80%, now they should produce 100%. So I expected a reshuffle, but not specific ministry per se, because overall they have been, I mean, it's really cloudy times. And they have been doing, in my opinion, they have been doing their best, but the overall system is not synchronized.
Yes.
So that's why we're not seeing the immediate output that it should be.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, definitely what also have been under the spotlight the past few days, well, the economic file has always been under the spotlight, but also the value of the Egyptian pound against the dollar. Everyone's talking about the inflation of prices, the taxes. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back to focus more on it.
In Inflation in Egypt hit its highest level this decade because of a weaker currency and slashed state assistance, escalating concerns about the economic health of the nation. Egypt's statistics agency said on Saturday the annual urban inflation rate increased to 28.1% in January on higher food and beverage prices. Egypt's headline inflation was at 23.3% a month earlier, according to data from the central bank, up from 19.4% in November, when Egypt floated its currency and allowed it to fall more than 50% against the US dollar. The steep drop in the Egyptian pound's value has made imports more expensive, while other recent government measures, such as a cut in subsidies for fuel, the introduction of a value-added tax, and increases in import tariffs, have sharply increased the cost of living for the country's largely working and middle-class people. Economic growth has averaged about 2.5% on average over the past 5 years, according to the IMF, even as inflation, the fiscal deficit, and unemployment rates jumped to double digits. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Amr al-Garhi said he expects surging inflation to peak by the end of the first quarter this year as the price shocks that followed decisions to raise fuel prices and abandon currency controls fade. El-Garhi, speaking after data showed annual consumer prices soared to 28% in January, said policymakers expected prices to jump after the pound was floated in November, a step that helped Egypt clinch a $12 billion International Monetary Fund loan accord. El-Garhi said he expects surging inflation to peak by the end of the first quarter as the price shocks following the increase in fuel prices and the pound's flotation fade. The minister said policymakers expected prices to jump, and adding that he had called the strong demand for local equities and that an encouraging sign and a strong vote of confidence in the economic reform program. Investors have backed Egypt on the steps it has taken to reshape its economy. A $4 billion debt sale in the international market in late January was almost double the amount that the Egyptian authorities had initially targeted. The local stock market has rallied more than 50% since the country floated its currency in November and secured a $12 billion IMF loan facility. London-based Capital Economics expects the cost of living in Egypt to peak in coming months, but start to ease after that and return to the Egyptian Central Bank's target of single digits by the end of 2018. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi at the end of December said the tough economic conditions would improve in 6 months, while praising the people for the way they had coped.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Engineer Riyadh, everyone's been focusing on the Egyptian pound and the American dollar. It reached high levels, actually, the American dollar against the Egyptian pound. Now, over the past few days, we've seen a deterioration in the value of the dollar against the Egyptian pound. Some people said it was expected. Some people are saying, well, this is a surprise and it's only temporary. It's going to go up again. Some people are saying, no, it's going to go further low. The government's saying, well, we expect that by the end of the year, the value of the real value of the Egyptian pound against the dollar will be set. How do you see this whole equation?
Well, it is a very good sign that it didn't go up. You know, it's going down. This is, but you know, of course, we shouldn't be that optimistic because we have to be encouraged by these signs. At the same time, we have to do more to enable us to see the dollar, the Egyptian pound is strong enough to come back to the level which has been last year, for example, and then go further. We deserve to get better way of living and standard of living because we are depending a lot on that foreign currency, especially the dollar in a lot of our things. That's why we have to minimize our importation and to depend on ourselves. If we are minimizing our importation, it doesn't mean that we have to cancel it, but we have to replace it by our industry, our agriculture, our this, and, you know, and to depend on ourselves to enable us to have a better, you know, yield of what we are achieving. And definitely, you know, it went up from 8.80 to 20 pounds, 19 pounds, 18 pounds. If it drops now, it is going to be,
It's
you know,
almost
appreciated. You know. Of course, 16, 15, this is all, it's still, we have got a long way to go. And it should be targeted lower than before, not, you know, if we, this...
Lower than before, as in lower than 8?
Of course, you know, because we are hopeful, you know, why not? We have to look at it from that angle, you know, this should be a target. Let us be optimistic about it. Let us see that we can do it, you know, because everybody wants to enjoy a better life.
Definitely.
A better standard of life, of living. And this we have to depend on ourselves, you know, agriculture-wise and so on, you know, and industrial-wise. All of these things needs from us a big effort, need education, need, you know, a way of thinking. The guy who went to the moon, he think first, and he planned first, and then he went up. You know, we have to plan, we have to have, you know, we have to be optimistic a little bit.
Yes, definitely. Well, Dr. Halwa, a lot of people are saying the real value of the Egyptian pound against the dollar. What is the real value of the Egyptian pound against the dollar? Is it 8 pounds? Is it 15 pounds? What determines this? Is it the foreign reserves? Is it the performance of the stock market? Is it the productivity of the Egyptian market? Is it the imports against the exports? How do you determine it?
It's all these factors you mentioned, but the main factor is the imports against exports. The real value of the Egyptian pound is not yet determined because we are still a developing economy. So we have not reached full integration of the economy where we can really determine the real value. I believe the Egyptian pound is still undervalued. Not so overall, there is room for improvement, as he just mentioned. We should aim for something lower than 8 pounds. It should be 1-to-1. We try to do that. So, and there is room. I mean, we're living on 5% of the land or 10% of the land, and so 90% of Egypt still functioning in a way for developing it and performing better, having higher output. We still have underground water in the Western Desert that need to be exploited. We still have mines and Western Desert oil and gas explorations and tourism. I mean, Egypt should have at least 100 million tourists per year, not 11 million.
Yes. Well, what would you say prompted this this increase in the value of the Egyptian pound against the dollar over the past few days? What triggered this change?
Well, they have been trying to manage the situation, and there was an inflow of about $2 billion to the foreign currency reserves, which allowed them to lower down the value of the dollar versus the Egyptian pound. And but this is not going to be for long. Also, we are in the winter. There is not much imports of fuel, which counts about $35 billion a year. When the summer comes, you will import more fuel, which means you're going to spend more dollars, which will allow for the Egyptian pound to be more devalued. So our only hope is to export more, try to improve the local economy, pay more attention to the small and medium enterprises. The country is still functioning as a dinosaur, where we're only paying more attention to the big industries, the big factories, the big industrial tycoons. I think there should be more attention to the small and medium enterprises, because this is really where you can see a quick improvement in the economy.
Yes, definitely. Well, Engineer Riyad, now we've seen over the past few months a high level of inflation. Prices went up in almost all products and commodities. Now, there's a saying in Egypt that whatever comes up doesn't come down, even though the value of the Egyptian pound is increasing against the dollar. Now, being a member of the Egyptian Federation of Industries, do you expect now, with the devaluation of the American dollar against the Egyptian pound, do you feel that prices, there is a chance that prices would go down again? Would it go down at least in certain commodities? Is this good news for the industries right now?
Definitely it should. Why, why it went up? Because of the dollar, because of the value of the dollar against the Egyptian pounds. And now if the Egyptian pound is getting stronger against the dollar, it means automatically that the prices should go down. There is no doubt about it.
But will it happen?
It should happen, because people are exaggerating in their, in their evaluation of things, And definitely I would like to see things is improving in this direction, And I don't see why not, They should,
Well, do you feel that now with the devaluation of the dollar against the pound, do you feel that the factories, the main industries would actually produce more, at least get more raw materials?
Yeah, of course, because this will give a chance to the local industry to perform and to introduce themselves to the market, because there was a very tough competition against the imported goods, because the imported goods in a lot of times they are not the perfect goods, and they were cheap and left over from factories abroad in China and other countries. Definitely now the appreciation of everything, the value of things will be appreciated by the consumer as well. That's why they are limiting their what you call it, their use of everything. Look at now, the electricity has gone up. People are, careful with it, because the subsidies of the government sometimes has got a disadvantage that people are misusing these kinds of things. That's why everybody is appreciating. Now the importation as well has been definitely gone down. And all of these things, it affects the Egyptian pounds against the dollar.
Yes, definitely. Well, Dr. Helwa, now the government has actually moved to cut subsidies, trim public sector wages, talking about raising the taxes. Do you feel that it really cancels out any sort of devaluation of the American dollar against the pound? Lifting the subsidies, it means still there will be more expenses on the Egyptian citizen. Do you feel that this is the right move? Do you feel that we're sort of obliged to do that as some sort of austerity measures to secure another tranche of the IMF loan and other loans from the big institutions?
I wouldn't pay attention to the IMF loans, to be honest. I think we have to pay attention to reforming our tax system, not increasing the tax system, just reforming it, where every individual and every corporation and every entity in Egypt is paying their fair share from their profits to the government. If this happens, you will have another source of income, really, and I imagine at least 25% more increase in government revenues from tax collection. This automatically will allow an evaluation of the Egyptian pounds versus the dollar, and the IMF loan is just more. I mean, it's supposed to become a backbone as an austerity measure in case we need it. And also it comes with a lot of social and economic reforms. There is a reason why the World Bank is acting as a consultant, because they see that our economic system is not functioning according to the global system, which is a free market economy.
Yes.
So there should be some sort of a government monitor, but at the same time allowing complete removal of subsidies and allowing a free market economy.
Well, you're talking about a total removal of the subsidies, and at the same time monitoring by the government. Do you feel, for instance, it would be an easy task for the government to monitor the prices of the commodities that are being sold everywhere, from pharmacies and medicine to supermarkets and street vendors?
Well, you have to pay attention to the poor Egyptians who are not able to pay the full price. So there should be some sort of a program that accommodate for the needs of these poor Egyptians. That's why I call monitoring.
Yes. Well, Engineer Riyad, do you feel that there would be any hope of actually increasing the basic salaries, the wages for the public sector at least? Do you feel that somehow it could balance things out, or is this out of the question to consider right now?
Well, the relationship between salaries and the, the cost of living, this should be adjusted, but the output of the individuals, if he's a worker or, whatever it is, it should be as well evaluated, because you cannot pay more than what you get, and the opposite too. That's why I believe this is a matter of measuring things, and definitely I would like to see the wages is paid according to the output of everybody, and this is a very important issue, because to have less money to enable a human being not to live a good life is not good. At the same time, everybody is demanding as well that it will be evaluated according to their output.
Well, how would you evaluate the private sector, or at least attracting the foreign investor here in Egypt? Do you feel that the parliament has been working on the investment law, the government has been working enough on facilitating any foreign investment coming to the country?
Definitely, all of us wanted very much that to industrialize our country first through our people here first, That is the role of the financing institutes and the banks. They have got a big role of doing that. And then, the foreign investment, if we see us, the local people are successful and they are doing a good job, and we have got a lot of advantages, people will come automatically and invest. You cannot attract them by advertising. They have to see the practicality of it. Definitely, the individuals, the education, the people, the success of our factories and the institutes and the bureaucracy and all of these things. If you want to recruit workers, recruit engineers, recruit people, you have to have the transparency. You have to prepare these people for the foreign investment, that the guy will come and he needs certain manpower, he will find it, where he can find it, how well are they educated. This is very important, not only to give him a piece of land.
Yes, definitely. Well, Dr. Helwa, one final question now. With the new reshuffle, what would you expect from this reshuffle? What sort of goals, what sort of performances are you expecting to see by the new ministers, the new strategies or planning by the whole new cabinet? What should we be looking for?
Better understanding of the overall policies of Egypt, which we know we all want the best for Egypt, and a quicker decision process. So far, there are a lot of investors have been complaining about lack of cooperation or lack of a speedy process to implement their projects in Egypt. So we need faster, because once you're done with one investor, you want to move to the next. And that should be an ongoing process on a daily basis. Egypt, I believe, needs about $100 billion worth of investments to reboost the economy. Yes. So how fast are we going? You need to calculate it according to what you need now and how you see the future.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, definitely a lot of work needs to be done, whether by this cabinet or the future cabinet. It's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done by every Egyptian citizen, working on maximizing their own output and our own production. And we're definitely going to be following up these developments and the performance of the new cabinet. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Dr. Sharif Al-Helwa, the political and economic expert, and also I'd like to thank very much Engineer Samir Riyad, member of the Egyptian Federation of Industries. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.